I never thought the knife in my back would come from my own blood. For 63 years, I gave my heart, my savings, and my dreams to the people I called family. I cooked, I cleaned. I poured every dollar and every ounce of energy into keeping their lives running smooth, while they whispered behind closed doors that I was holding them back. The day I overheard them laughing about how Grandma would never amount to anything was the day I learned the difference between being loved and being useful. But I didn't let anger lead me. Instead, I began to plan in silence. Hello, my name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the truth about how I reclaimed my dignity from the people who should have valued me most. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that uncover the real power behind quiet determination. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Mom, can you watch the kids today? Linda's got that job interview downtown. I looked up from my morning coffee to see Mark standing in my kitchen doorway, already dressed and ready to leave. No good morning, no please. Just the expectation that I'd drop everything for them. Of course, honey, I said, setting down my cup. What time will you be back? Probably around 5, maybe 6. He was already heading toward the door. Oh, and can you pick up groceries? We're out of milk again. The door slammed before I could answer. Through the window, I watched him climb into the car I'd helped him buy 6 months ago, when his credit wouldn't qualify for a loan. The same car he'd promised to make payments on, but somehow never managed to. Grammy! 8-year-old Lily came bounding down the stairs, followed by her 6-year-old brother, Tommy. Can we have pancakes? Please, Grammy, Tommy added, giving me those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of Mark at that age. Of course, babies. I stood up, my knees protesting after sitting too long. Go wash your hands while I get everything ready. As I mixed the batter, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Susan appeared in her bathrobe, her hair still messy from sleep. Morning, Mom. She poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made at 6 a.m. God, I feel like I barely slept. Jamie was up half the night on that computer again. Maybe you should take his laptop away after 10, I suggested, flipping the first pancake. Easy for you to say. You don't have to deal with his attitude. Susan slumped into a chair. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake moving back here after the divorce. I wanted to tell her that having her and Jamie here brought me joy. That this house felt less empty with family in it. Instead, I just smiled and added extra chocolate chips to Tommy's pancakes. Mom! Kyle's voice echoed from upstairs. Have you seen my blue shirt? The one with the logo? It's in the dryer! I called back, then turned to Susan. What time does Jamie leave for school? 7:30. But don't worry about driving him. Mrs. Henson said she could take him with her grandson. Mrs. Henson from next door had been watching our family dynamics with increasing concern lately. Yesterday, she'd pulled me aside while I was bringing in groceries. Evelyn, honey, she'd said, her weathered hands gentle on my arm. You know you don't have to carry everyone's burden, right? I'd just smiled and changed the subject, but her words had stuck with me. Kyle finally appeared, rushing through the kitchen in his work uniform. Thanks for washing this, Mom. He grabbed the shirt from the clean laundry basket I'd left on the counter. Can I borrow $20? Payday's not till Friday. I reached for my purse without thinking. It was automatic now. Kyle needed money. Susan needed babysitting. Mark needed groceries. My small pension and the money I made from my online quilting business stretched to cover everyone's gaps. Here you go, sweetheart. You're the best. He kissed my cheek and was gone. leaving me with 2 hungry grandchildren and another day of putting everyone else's needs first. After breakfast, I drove the kids to school, then stopped at the grocery store, while pushing the cart through the aisles. I ran into Dorothy Williams, an old friend I'd known since high school. "Evelyn, how are you, honey?" Dorothy's smile was warm and genuine. "I was just thinking about you the other day. How's that quilting business of yours going?" "Oh, it's going well," I said, feeling a flutter of pride. "I just finished a custom piece for a client in California. She's ordering 3 more." "That's wonderful. You always were talented with your hands." Dorothy's expression grew more serious. "Are you taking care of yourself, though? Every time I see you, you're running errands for someone else." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Kids need to be picked up early today. Teacher conference moved up. Can you get them at 2? I showed Dorothy the message with a tired smile. "Speaking of which, Evelyn," Dorothy said quietly, "when's the last time someone asked what you needed?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I couldn't remember. That afternoon, while the kids napped on the couch, I sat at my sewing machine, working on an intricate star pattern quilt. This was my sanctuary, the only place where my hands created something beautiful instead of just cleaning up messes. My phone rang. It was a client from my online store. "Mrs. Carter, this is Rebecca from Portland. I received the wedding quilt yesterday, and I have to tell you, it's absolutely breathtaking. My daughter cried when she saw it." "I'm so glad you're pleased," I said, feeling that familiar warm glow that came from knowing my work mattered. "I've already recommended you to 3 friends. Would you be interested in taking on some larger commissioned pieces?" After hanging up, I looked around my living room. Toys scattered on the floor, dishes in the sink that weren't mine, bills on the coffee table for utilities I paid but others used. This was my life, cleaning up after grown adults who saw me as a convenience rather than a person. When Mark and Linda returned that evening, they barely acknowledged me. "How'd the interview go?" I asked Linda as she collapsed dramatically on the couch. "Terrible. They wanted someone younger, more tech-savvy." She made air quotes. "Probably going to hire some 20-something who doesn't know half what I know." "I'm sure something better will come along," I said gently. "Easy for you to, say, Mom," Mark interjected. "You don't have a family to support." The words stung. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a 38-year-old man who'd never learned to stand on his own feet because I'd always been there to catch him when he fell. "Dinner's in the slow cooker," I said quietly. "I'm going to go work on my quilting for a while." As I climbed the stairs to my small sewing room, I heard Linda's voice drift up from the kitchen. "Thank God for Evelyn. At least someone around here has their act together." But even her gratitude felt hollow, because I knew that tomorrow would bring the same requests, the same assumptions that my time and money were theirs to use. I sat down at my machine and began stitching, each careful stitch a meditation. In my online quilting community, I was respected, valued, sought after. Here, in my own home, I was invisible. Useful, but invisible. The contrast was becoming harder to ignore. I woke up on October 15th with a strange flutter of anticipation in my chest. 63 years old today. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe someone would remember without me having to remind them. Downstairs, the kitchen was already chaotic. Mark was arguing with Linda about whose turn it was to take out the trash, while Tommy and Lily fought over the last of the cereal. "Good morning, everyone," I said brightly. "Morning, Mom." Mark barely looked up from his phone. "Can you drop the kids off today? Linda's car is making that noise again." "Of course." I reached for my coffee mug, the one Jamie had painted. For me, last Mother's Day, with World's Best Grammy, in crooked letters. It was the only thing in this kitchen that felt truly mine. Susan wandered in, looking frazzled. "Mom, do you think you could watch Jamie after school? I finally got that job interview at the insurance office. Absolutely, sweetheart. Good luck with the interview." I waited. Surely someone would notice. But the morning continued. Requests, demands, chaos, with no acknowledgement of the date. After everyone left, I sat alone with my coffee and the newspaper. The house felt hollow without the noise, and for the first time I let myself feel disappointed. Mrs. Henson appeared at my back door with a coffee cake and a warm smile. "Happy birthday, Evelyn!" Tears pricked my eyes. My neighbor remembered when my own family hadn't. "Oh, honey, thank you so much." I hugged her tightly. "Come in, please. Have some coffee with me." "I can't stay long, but I wanted to make sure someone celebrated you today." She set the cake on my counter and looked at me with concern. "They didn't remember, did they?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "Evelyn, you deserve better than this." That evening, I set the table for dinner as usual. Maybe during the meal someone would realize. Maybe Kyle would remember. He'd always been good with dates. But dinner came and went with the usual complaints about work, school, and money. As I cleared the dishes, I heard voices drifting from the living room. Mark and Linda thought I was upstairs. "I can't believe she's 63 already," Linda said. "Seems like yesterday she was trying to start that little craft business. What? Was it custom curtains or something?" Mark laughed. "Yeah, that lasted about 5 minutes. Mom's always had these grand ideas but never follows through on anything. At least she keeps the house running," Linda replied. "Though sometimes I wonder what she even did with her life. I mean, she never really accomplished anything significant, you know." My hands stilled on the dishwater. The plate I was holding felt slippery suddenly. "She was always talking about opening some kind of shop when we were kids," Mark continued. "Dad used to say she lived in a fantasy world. Probably why he worked so much. Had to be the practical one." "It's probably for the best that those dreams never worked out," Linda said. "Can you imagine Mom trying to run a real business? She can barely manage her own finances. Thank God she has us to keep her grounded," Mark said, and they both laughed. I set the plate down carefully, my hands trembling slightly. Not from hurt. I'd moved past hurt. This was something colder, clearer. I was seeing my family with new eyes, and what I saw was ugly. I climbed the stairs to my sewing room and sat down at my computer. My online quilting store had 43 5-star reviews. My bank account showed steady income from my work. My email inbox contained requests from customers across the country. Mrs. Evelyn Quilts wasn't a failed dreamer. She was successful, respected, valued. But Evelyn Carter, the mother and grandmother downstairs, was apparently a joke. I opened my laptop and began researching business licenses, commercial real estate, and small business loans. Not because I was angry. Anger would have made me confront them. I was thinking clearly for the first time in years. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jamie stood in my doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Grammy. Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." He sat on the small chair beside my sewing table, fidgeting with his hands. "I heard what Uncle Mark and Aunt Linda were saying downstairs." My heart clenched. "You shouldn't have to hear things like that, Jamie." But Grammy, they're wrong. His young voice was fierce with indignation. I've seen your website. I've seen the quilts you make. They're beautiful, and people pay good. Money for them. I looked at my 15-year-old grandson, the only person in this house who truly saw me. You know about my business? Of course I know. I helped you set up that new photo backdrop last month, remember? He leaned forward. Grammy, why don't you tell them how successful you really are? Sometimes, honey, people aren't ready to see you differently than how they've always seen you. But that's not fair. No, it's not. I reached over and squeezed his hand. But fairness isn't something we can control. We can only control how we respond. After Jamie left, I sat in the quiet of my sewing room, surrounded by the evidence of my skill and creativity. Tomorrow I would research commercial spaces downtown. I would call Dorothy about a business partnership we'd joked about years ago. Tonight, on my forgotten birthday, I began to plan my freedom. The explosion came 3 weeks later during Sunday dinner. I'd spent the afternoon cooking Mark's favorite pot roast, hoping for a peaceful family meal. Instead, I found myself in the crosshairs of their frustrations. We need to talk about money, Mom. Mark set down his fork with authority. Linda and I have been looking at the bills. What about them? I asked, though my stomach was already tightening. The utilities are getting out of hand. The mortgage payment is taking too big a chunk out of your pension. Linda's voice had that sharp edge it got when she was building up to something. And with Susan and Jamie living here too, the grocery bills are insane. I manage just fine, I said quietly. Do you, though? Mark leaned back in his chair like he was preparing for a business presentation. Because from where I sit, you're drowning financially, and you're too proud to admit it. Susan looked uncomfortable. Mark, maybe we shouldn't... No, Susan, this needs to be said. Mark's voice grew louder. Mom, you're 63 years old. You should be enjoying retirement, not struggling to keep this big house running while supporting all of us. I'm not struggling, I said, but Mark talked right over me. The solution is obvious. You sell this house. It's worth at least $300,000, and move into one of those nice senior communities. Assisted living. You'd have people to cook for you, activities, medical care right there. Assisted living? The words came out strangled. Mark, I'm not an invalid. Linda jumped in. It's not about being an invalid, Evelyn. It's about being practical. You could live comfortably on the money from selling this place, and the rest of us could figure out our own housing situations. Without having to worry about being a burden on you, Mark added, as if he was doing me a favor. I looked around the table. Susan was staring at her plate. Kyle had his headphones half on, clearly wanting to escape. Jamie was watching everything, with wide, horrified eyes. A burden? I repeated. That's not what we meant, Linda said quickly, but her tone suggested otherwise. We just think you'd be happier with people your own age. Playing bingo, doing crafts. Crafts. I tasted the word like it was bitter. You mean, like the quilting business that's apparently just a cute hobby? Mark waved his hand dismissively. Mom, selling a few quilts online isn't the same as running a real business. It's nice that you have something to keep you busy, but let's be realistic about what it is. And what is it, Mark? It's a hobby, a way to make a little pin money, but it's not something you can build a life on at your age. Linda nodded. Exactly. And honestly, Evelyn, watching you try to keep up with everything, the house, the cooking, the cleaning, trying to help all of us, it's exhausting just to watch. You're not 25 anymore. The table fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked at each of their faces. Really looked. And saw something that chilled me to the bone. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were concerned about their convenience. So, your solution, I said slowly, is for me to sell my home, move into assisted living, and give you the money to figure out your own lives? We're not asking for the money, Mark said defensively. We're just saying it would solve everyone's problems. Everyone's problems, I repeated. Yes. Linda's voice rose with frustration. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this huge house. We wouldn't have to worry about you. And everyone could move on with their lives. Susan finally looked up. Mom, maybe there's a middle ground here. Maybe you don't have to sell the house right away, but we could look into getting you some help. Help with what exactly? I asked. Well, the housework is getting to be too much for you. Says who? Says the fact that you're always tired, always stressed about money, always cleaning up after grown adults who can't pick up their own socks. The words came out sharper than I intended. Mark's face darkened. That's not fair, Mom. We all contribute to this household. I almost laughed. How, Mark? How do you contribute? I help with repairs. I handle the yard work. You hired someone to cut the grass and charged it to my credit card. I handle the finances by telling me how to spend my own money? Linda stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. This is exactly why we're having this conversation, Evelyn. You're getting defensive and unreasonable. These are the decisions you make when you're not thinking clearly anymore. The room went dead silent. Even Kyle pulled off his headphones completely. Not thinking clearly, I said. It wasn't a question. Linda didn't mean it like that, Susan said quickly. Yes, she did. I looked directly at Linda. You think I'm losing my mental capacity, that I'm too old and confused to make my own decisions. I think you're overwhelmed, Linda said, doubling down. And I think you're too stubborn to admit when you need help. I stood up slowly, my chair legs making their own scraping sound against the hardwood floor I'd refinished myself 3 years ago. You want to know what I think? My voice was calm, which seemed to unnerve them more than shouting would have. I think you've all gotten very comfortable treating this house like a hotel, and me like the staff. I think you've forgotten that I'm a person with my own thoughts, dreams, and capabilities. Mom. Mark started. I'm not finished. I looked at each of them. I think you've convinced yourselves that I'm some helpless old woman who needs managing, when the truth is that I've been managing all of you for years. Jamie was staring at me with something that looked like admiration. Susan's eyes were filling with tears. Kyle looked like he wanted to disappear. Mark and Linda looked angry. If that's how you really feel about us, Mark said coldly, maybe we should make other arrangements. Maybe you should. The words hung in the air like smoke. I could see the shock on their faces. They'd expected me to back down, to apologize, to smooth things over like I always did. Instead, I picked up my plate and walked to the kitchen. Behind me, voices erupted in argument. But I didn't listen. I had planning to do. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Dorothy Williams' house, gathering courage for a conversation I should have had years ago. Her front porch was lined with pottery planters she'd made herself, evidence of a woman who'd never stopped creating, never stopped dreaming. Evelyn! Dorothy opened the door before I could knock. What a wonderful surprise. Come in, honey. I just put on a fresh pot of coffee. Her living room was warm and cluttered with the evidence of a life fully lived. Paintings she'd created, books she'd read, Photographs from travels she'd taken alone after her husband passed. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something." I accepted the steaming mug she offered. "Remember when we used to talk about opening a little place together? Part cafe, part craft studio?" "Of course I remember. We spent hours planning it." Her eyes lit up with the memory. "You were going to teach quilting classes. I was going to teach pottery. We were going to call it Second Chapter, or something like that. Well, I've inherited Aunt Margaret's building downtown. You know, the one next to the bookstore." Dorothy nearly spilled her coffee. "The brick building with all those beautiful windows?" "That's the one. It's been sitting empty for 2 years, but the bones are good. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, plenty of space for workshops and retail." "Evelyn, are you serious? Are you actually thinking about—" "I'm not thinking about it, Dorothy. I'm doing it." I set down my mug and pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken during my secret visit last week. "I've already contacted a contractor for estimates. The upstairs apartment is small but perfect for someone who wants to live where they work." Dorothy stared at the photos, then at me. "What changed? Last time we talked about this, you said the family needed you too much." "The family has made it very clear that they think I'm too old, too scattered, and too much of a burden to be capable of anything meaningful." "They said that?" I told her about the birthday they forgot, the cruel conversation I'd overheard, and Sunday's disaster. Dorothy listened with growing anger on my face. "Those ungrateful—" She caught herself. "I'm sorry, honey, but that's inexcusable." "The funny thing is, they have no idea what I've actually been doing all these years." I pulled out my tablet and showed her my quilting website. "Look at this." Dorothy scrolled through the customer reviews, the gallery of custom pieces, the testimonials. Her eyes grew wider with each page. "Evelyn, this is incredible. You've got over 200 completed orders, and every single review is 5 stars. I've been saving every penny from the business for the past 4 years. I've got enough to renovate the downstairs and live modestly while we get established. If you're interested, equal partners. I handle textiles and quilting. You handle pottery and painting. We share the cafe profits and the teaching income." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos of the empty building. "How long have you been planning this?" "Seriously? About 3 weeks. In my dreams. About 20 years." "And your family doesn't know?" "My family thinks I'm a confused old woman who needs to be put in assisted living for my own good." Dorothy laughed, a sound full of admiration and disbelief. "They're about to get the shock of their lives. That's the plan." We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. Dorothy had been teaching pottery classes at the community center for years and had her own loyal following. She also had a small inheritance from her late sister that she'd been wondering how to invest. "I've been so bored, Evelyn," she admitted. "Teaching 1 class a week, rattling around in this house alone. I need a project, a purpose." "So you're in?" "Honey, I've been in since the moment you said cafe and craft studio. When do we start?" That afternoon, I drove to the bank and met with Sarah Martinez, the small business loan officer who'd been handling my accounts for years. "Mrs. Carter, I have to say your business plan is quite impressive." Sarah looked over the documents I'd prepared. "Your online quilting business shows consistent income growth, and your credit score is excellent." "I've been conservative with my spending," I said, which was true. While my family spent freely, I'd been quietly building my financial foundation. The building appraisal looks good, and with your down payment, you qualify for the small business loan at prime rate. Sarah smiled. I have to ask, does your family know about this venture? Not yet. I wanted to make sure everything was solid before I shared the news. Well, they're going to be very proud. Starting a business at 63 takes real courage. Driving home, I thought about Sarah's words. Proud. When was the last time my family had expressed pride in anything I'd done? When was the last time they'd asked about my dreams, instead of just my availability to serve theirs? I pulled into my driveway and saw Mark's car in its usual spot. Through the kitchen window, I could see him and Linda at my table, probably planning my next intervention about the assisted living situation. But as I sat in my car, looking at my house, the house I had maintained, improved, and filled with love for decades, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt powerful. Tomorrow I would call the contractor. Next week, Dorothy and I would sign the partnership papers. In 2 months, we'd be renovating. In 6 months, we'd be open for business. My family thought I was too old for new dreams. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The changes started small. On Monday morning, when Mark asked me to drive Linda to her dentist appointment, I said, I'm sorry, but I have other plans today. Other plans? Mark looked genuinely confused. Like what? Business meetings, I said, which was true. Dorothy and I were meeting with the contractor at 10. Mom, Linda really needs a ride. Her car's in the shop. Then you should drive her, or she should call an Uber. The look on his face was almost comical. But you don't mind driving people places. I don't mind when it's convenient for me. Today isn't convenient. I left them staring after me as I walked out to my car. It felt strange but liberating to prioritize my own schedule for once. The meeting with the contractor went better than I'd hoped. Bob Martinez, Sarah's husband as it turned out, walked through the building with an experienced eye. The structure's solid, he told Dorothy and me. You'll need electrical updates, some plumbing work for the cafe area, and cosmetic renovations throughout. But honestly, this is a gem. They don't make buildings like this anymore. What's your timeline estimate? I asked. 3 months for full renovation if we start next week. 4 if you want to add the second bathroom upstairs. Dorothy and I looked at each other. We want the second bathroom, we said in unison. That afternoon, I came home to find Susan in my kitchen, looking frantic. Mom, thank God you're here. Jamie needs to be at soccer practice in 20 minutes, and I can't leave work early again. Can you take him? Where's Mark? He's, I don't know, somewhere with Linda. Mom, please, Jamie's already missed 2 practices this month. I looked at my grandson, who was clearly embarrassed by his mother's desperation. Jamie, do you have your gear? Yes, Grammy. But if you can't drive me, I can walk. It's only about 2 miles. 2 miles. In this heat. Because the adults in his life couldn't manage a simple schedule. I'll take you, I said. But Susan, this can't keep happening. You need to work out reliable transportation for Jamie's activities. I know. It's just hard with work and everything. On the drive to practice, Jamie was quiet until we were almost there. Grammy, are you okay? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know. Stronger, maybe? Like you're not letting people push you around as much. Is that what it looked like before? Like people were pushing me around? Jamie thought carefully. Kind of, yeah. Like everyone expected you to say yes to everything. And you always did. And what do you think about that? I think you should say no more often. You do a lot for everyone, but Nobody really asks what you want to do. Out of the mouths of babes. What do you think I want to do, Jamie? I think you want to make more quilts, and maybe spend time with people who appreciate how cool your art is. I pulled into the parking lot and turned to look at my grandson. Would you like to see something special this weekend? Something I've been working on? His eyes lit up. Really? What is it? It's a surprise, but I think you'll like it. That evening, Kyle approached me with his usual request. Mom, can I borrow $50? I'm short on rent this month. Kyle, how often are you short on rent? He shrugged. I don't know. Sometimes. Things come up. What things? Just stuff. You know, living expenses. I looked at my youngest son, 28 years old, charming smile, no sense of financial responsibility, and made a decision. I'm not going to lend you money for rent anymore, Kyle. What? Mom, come on. It's just $50. It's never just $50. Last month it was $60 for car repairs. The month before that it was $40 for groceries. Kyle, in the past year, I've given you over $800. Given me? Mom, those were loans. Name one time you've paid me back. Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. I will, though. When I get that promotion. Kyle, you've been waiting for that promotion for 6 months. And even if you get it, you won't pay me back because you'll find something else you need money for. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm your son. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Because you're my son, and you're old enough to handle your own responsibilities. He stormed out, but I felt calm. For the first time in years, I'd set a boundary with Kyle, instead of just enabling him. Later that night, as I was working in my sewing room, I heard voices from downstairs. Mark and Linda were back, and they were not happy. She's acting weird. Lately, Linda's voice carried up the stairs. Refusing to help with simple things, being difficult about money. Maybe she's going through something, Mark replied. Menopause or whatever. Mark, she's 63. Menopause was 20 years ago. Then what's her problem? I turned off my sewing machine and listened more carefully. I think she's having some kind of late-life crisis, Linda continued. You know, feeling unimportant or whatever. We probably just need to be patient until it passes. Or maybe. Susan's voice joined the conversation. She's tired of everyone treating her like a personal assistant. Oh, please, Linda snapped. What else does she have to do? It's not like she has a real job or social life. I smiled to myself and went back to my quilting. They had no idea what was coming. The first crack appeared on Thursday morning when no one could find clean clothes. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee and reading emails from potential customers when Mark appeared in wrinkled clothes. Mom, did you forget to do laundry? I didn't forget, I said without looking up from my tablet. I decided not to do it. What do you mean you decided not to do it? I mean, I'm not doing everyone else's laundry anymore. There's a washer and dryer in the basement. You know how to use them. Mark stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. But you always do the laundry. Yes, I do. And now you can do yours. Linda appeared, wrapped in a bathrobe, her hair still messy. Evelyn, I have a job interview this afternoon. I need my blue suit cleaned. There's a dry cleaner on 5th Street. I don't have money for the dry cleaner right now. I looked up from my tablet. Linda, you've been living in my house for 8 months, eating my food, using my utilities. Maybe it's time to start contributing to household expenses instead of asking me to subsidize your dry cleaning. The silence that followed was deafening, Linda's face went through several shades of red before she turned and stomped upstairs. Susan came down an hour later looking panicked. "Mom, Jamie can't find any clean jeans and I'm already late for work. There are jeans in the dirty clothes hamper. They can be washed." "But that takes hours." "Yes, it does. Which is why most people plan ahead and do laundry regularly instead of waiting until they have nothing clean to wear." Susan looked hurt. "I don't understand why you're being like this." "Being like what, Susan?" "Difficult. Unhelpful. This isn't like you." I set down my tablet and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. "Susan, honey, when's the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not what I could do for you, but how I was feeling, what I was thinking about, what was happening in my life." Susan opened her mouth, then closed it. We talk all the time. We talk about your job, your problems with Jamie, your money worries, your ex-husband. When do we talk about me? But Mom, you never seem like you need to talk about yourself. You're always so together, so capable." "And what if I told you I wasn't always together? What if I told you I had dreams, worries, and needs of my own?" Susan looked genuinely confused. "But you can tell me those things." "Can I? Because every time I've tried to talk about my quilting business, you've changed the subject. When I mentioned wanting to travel, you reminded me about Jamie's school schedule. When I said I was thinking about redecorating my bedroom, you suggested I save the money instead. I was just being practical. You were dismissing me, just like everyone else in this house. That afternoon, I met Dorothy at the building for our second walkthrough with Bob Martinez. The electrical work had started and the place was full of possibility. "The kitchen space is going to be perfect for the cafe," Dorothy said, running her hand along the exposed brick wall. "And this lighting will be beautiful for evening pottery classes. I can already picture the quilting area over there by those big windows," I added. "Natural light is so important for detailed work." Bob looked up from his measurements. "You ladies are really doing this, aren't you? Starting fresh at your age?" "Our age?" Dorothy laughed. "Honey, we're not dead yet. We've got at least 20 good years left in us." "My apologies. It's just refreshing to see people following their dreams, instead of just talking about them." On the drive home, I felt that familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness. The business was becoming real, which meant the confrontation with my family was approaching fast. I walked into a house in chaos. Linda was on the phone, arguing with someone about a job application. Mark was in the kitchen staring into the refrigerator like it might magically produce dinner. Kyle was on the couch complaining to Susan about his rent situation. "Mom, thank God you're home," Susan said. "Nobody knows what we're having for dinner." "Whatever you decide to make," I said, heading for the stairs. "But you always cook dinner." "Not tonight. I have work to do." "Work?" Mark looked up from the refrigerator. "What work?" "Business work." In my sewing room, I spread out the fabric that had arrived that morning. A custom order for an anniversary quilt from a couple in Arizona. The pattern was intricate, challenging, and exactly the kind of work that made me feel alive. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Grammy, can I come up? It's crazy down here." "Of course, sweetheart." Jamie appeared in my doorway, looking relieved to escape the chaos. "They're fighting about whose turn it is to cook, but nobody actually knows how to make anything except sandwiches. They'll figure it out." "Grammy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you leaving us?" The question caught me off guard. "What makes you think that?" "You're different. Not mean different, but like independent different. Like you're not going to take care of everyone anymore. I looked at my grandson, this thoughtful boy who saw everything. Jamie, would it upset you if I became more independent? No, he said immediately. I think it's cool. I just want to know if you're going to be okay. I'm going to be more than okay, sweetheart. I'm going to be happy. Good. You deserve to be happy. From downstairs came the sound of raised voices and something crashing to the floor. Jamie and I looked at each other and smiled. Want to see what I'm working on? I asked. For the next hour, I showed Jamie the custom quilt, explaining the techniques and patterns. He asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely interested in the artistry involved. Grammy, this is amazing. How much do people pay for something like this? This one will sell for $1,200. Jamie's eyes widened. $1,200? For one quilt? It's not just a quilt, honey. It's art. It's history. It's something that will be passed down through generations. Does Uncle Mark know? You make this much money? Uncle Mark thinks I make pin money selling pot holders. Jamie laughed, then grew serious. They really don't know, do they? About how talented you are? No, they don't. And I'm tired of hiding it. The next morning brought the biggest explosion yet. I was having my coffee when Linda stormed into the kitchen, waving a credit card statement. Evelyn, what is this? Charge for $500 to Martinez Construction? I looked at the statement calmly. It's a deposit for renovation work. Renovation work? On what? A building I'm converting into a business. The kitchen fell silent. Mark appeared from the living room. Susan came down the stairs, and even Kyle emerged from wherever he'd been hiding. What kind of business? Mark asked carefully. A cafe and craft studio. Dorothy Williams and I are partners. Linda's laugh was sharp and ugly. You're joking. I'm not joking. Evelyn, you can't be serious. You don't know the first thing about running a business. I stood up, walked to my laptop, and turned the screen toward them. My quilting website filled the display showing order after order, review after review, testimonial after testimonial. I've been running a successful business for 4 years. I just haven't been broadcasting it to people who wouldn't understand. The silence stretched until Mark finally spoke. This is insane, Mom. You can't just... I can't just what, Mark? Follow my dreams. Use my own money for my own purposes. Make decisions about my own life. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You've all gotten so comfortable thinking of me as your personal support system that you've forgotten I'm a person with my own goals and desires. Susan looked stricken. Mom, we never meant to make you feel that way. Didn't you, Susan? Then why did you assume I'd always be available to drive Jamie around? Why did you move back home without asking if it was convenient for me? Why did none of you remember my birthday 3 weeks ago? The kitchen was dead silent, except for the ticking of the clock. We forgot your birthday? Susan whispered. You forgot my birthday. You forgot I'm a person. You forgot that maybe, just maybe, I have a life beyond serving all of you. I closed my laptop and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mark called after me. To live my life. I spent the day at the building with Dorothy, watching electricians work and planning our grand opening. When I returned home that evening, I found Jamie sitting on my front porch steps, looking troubled. Hey, sweetheart. What are you doing out here? Waiting for you. It's been pretty intense inside. I sat down beside him. Want to talk about it? After you left this morning, everyone started fighting, really fighting. Jamie picked at the grass beside the steps. Uncle Mark was yelling about how you're having some kind of breakdown. Aunt Linda kept saying you were being selfish and unrealistic. And what do you think? I think they're scared because they finally realize they don't know who you really are. The wisdom of teenagers never ceased to amaze me. What else happened? Mom started crying. She kept saying she never realized she was taking advantage of you. Uncle Kyle got mad and said everyone was being dramatic. And then what? Then I told them the truth. My heart skipped. What truth? About your quilting business. About how much money you make. How many customers you have. How people from all over the country buy your work. Jamie looked at me with determination. Grammy, I'm tired of them acting like you're some helpless old lady when you're actually amazing. Jamie, you didn't have to... Yes, I did. They needed to know, and they needed to hear it from someone who pays attention. We went inside together, and I immediately felt the tension in the air. Everyone was in the living room, but the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words. Mom. Susan's voice was quiet, almost fragile. Jamie showed us your website. I looked at my grandson, who gave me an encouraging nod. He showed us the reviews, the photos of your work, the prices. Susan's eyes were red from crying. Mom, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you quilted, but I didn't realize you were so successful. Mark was sitting in his chair looking stunned. Some of those quilts sell for over $1,000. Yes, they do. And you've been doing this for 4 years? Yes. Linda, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us? When would I have told you, Linda? Between driving you to appointments, cooking your meals, and listening to you complain about job interviews? That's not fair, isn't it? I looked around the room at all of them. When's the last time any of you asked me about my day, my interests, my goals? Kyle shifted uncomfortably. We talk all the time, Mom. We talk about your problems, Kyle. Your money troubles, your job troubles, your relationship troubles. But when did you last ask me what I was excited about? The silence was deafening. Susan wiped her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never realized. You never realized because you never looked. You were all so comfortable with me in the role of helper, supporter, problem solver that you stopped seeing me as a person with my own life. But we love you, Susan said desperately. I know you love me. But love without respect isn't enough. Love without interest in who I am as a person isn't enough. Mark finally found his voice. So what's this business thing? You're really opening a cafe? Dorothy and I are opening a cafe and craft studio. We'll serve coffee, light meals, and host classes. I'll teach quilting, she'll teach pottery. We'll also sell our work and pieces from other local artists. And you think this will work? Linda's skepticism was still evident. I know it will work. I've done my research, created a business plan, secured financing, and lined up customers. Unlike some people in this room, I don't start projects I can't finish. The barb hit home. Mark flinched. Kyle looked away, and Linda's face reddened. Where is this place? Susan asked quietly. Downtown. The brick building next to the bookstore that used to belong to Aunt Margaret. The one with the big windows? That's the one. We start renovations next week, Jamie spoke up. Grammy, can I help? With the renovations, I mean. I'm good with tools, and I could use the experience. I'd love your help, sweetheart. What about us? Susan asked hesitantly. Is there? Could we help too? I looked at my daughter, seeing the genuine regret in her eyes. Susan, help with what? The business. Whatever you need. I know I've been selfish, and I want to make it up to you. Making it up to me isn't about helping with my business. It's about treating me like a person whose life matters. I want to do that too. Mark cleared his throat. Mom, I owe you an apology. A big one. I've been treating you like your personal assistant. Yeah, like that. He looked genuinely ashamed. I convinced myself I was looking out for you. But really, I was just using you. Yes, you were. And the stuff about assisted living, God, I can't believe I said that. You're obviously more capable than any of us realized. I'm more capable than you allowed me to be. Linda had been quiet throughout this exchange, but finally spoke up. I don't understand why you kept it secret. The business, I mean. Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of it. You'd find reasons why it wouldn't work. Why I should be more practical. Why I should focus on taking care of everyone else, instead of pursuing my own dreams. We wouldn't have... Linda, 3 weeks ago, you told Mark that I lived in a fantasy world, and it was good that my dreams never worked out. You said I could barely manage my own finances, and needed you all to keep me grounded. Linda's face went pale. You heard that? I heard it. And it was the moment I decided to stop hiding who I really am. The room fell silent again. Finally, Kyle spoke up. So what happens now? With us, I mean? With the family? That depends on whether you can learn to see me as Evelyn Carter, successful business owner and artist, instead of just Mom, the person who solves your problems. I want to try, Susan said immediately. Me too, Mark added, though he looked uncertain. I want to learn about your quilting, Kyle said. I never knew it was so. Professional. I looked at Linda, who was staring at her hands. Linda? She looked up, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked humble. I owe you the biggest apology of all. I've been awful to you, and I don't have any excuse except that I was jealous. Jealous of what? Of how everyone loved you, how they turned to you for everything. I felt like I could never measure up, so I tried to make you seem smaller. She wiped her eyes. I'm ashamed of myself. Linda, I never wanted to compete with you. I just wanted to be respected in my own home. I know that now, and I'm going to do better, if you'll let me. I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw people who were finally ready to see me. All right, I said. We'll try. But things are going to be different from now on. Different how? Mark asked. Different in that I'm not your personal assistant anymore. I'm your mother, and I have my own life, my own business, my own dreams. You're all welcome to be part of that life, but only if you can respect me as a person, not just as a service provider. Everyone nodded, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful about my family. Now, I said, standing up, who wants to see the building? 2 weeks later, I called a family meeting. Not the kind where I quietly suggested we talk about something, but the kind where I sent everyone a formal text message saying, family meeting, Sunday 3 p.m., kitchen table, attendance mandatory. They all showed up looking nervous. I had my laptop open, financial documents spread across the table, and a folder full of business plans. This wasn't going to be a gentle conversation. Before we start, I said, I want everyone to understand that this isn't a discussion. This is me telling you how things are going to work from now on. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Mom, that sounds pretty harsh. Mark, you told me 3 weeks ago that I should sell my house and move into assisted living because I was too old and confused to manage my own life. I think I've earned the right to be harsh. He fell silent. I'm moving out, I continued. Dorothy and I are going to live in the apartments above the cafe. The renovations will be finished in 6 weeks, and I'll be out of this house in 2 months. Susan gasped. Mom, you don't have to leave. We can all work together. Susan, I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because I'm ready to start the life I should have been living all along. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. This is my financial situation. As you can see, my quilting business has generated over $40,000 in profit over the past 2 years. Combined with my pension and the money I'll make from renting out this house, I'll be financially comfortable. Renting out this house? Linda looked shocked. Yes, I'm not selling it. It's my security and my legacy. But I am renting it out for fair market value, which is $1,800 a month. The silence was deafening. Kyle was the first to speak. $1,800. But we don't pay anything now. That's correct. You've been living rent-free in a house I own, eating food I buy, using utilities I pay for. That arrangement is ending. Mom, Mark said carefully, we can't afford $1,800. Then you'll need to make some changes, get better jobs, find roommates, or find somewhere else to live. Those are adult decisions that adults make. But we're family, Linda protested. Yes, we are. And I've spent the last 8 months supporting this family, financially, while being treated like hired help. That's going to change. I pulled out a piece of paper. I've calculated what you all owe me for the past year, Mark and Linda. $4,000 in groceries, utilities, and miscellaneous expenses. Susan, $2,200. Kyle, $1,600 in loans that were never repaid. The numbers hung in the air like a weight. I'm not asking you to pay me back, I continued. But I want you to understand the reality of what's been happening here. I've been subsidizing all your lives while you've treated me like I was the one who needed taking care of. Susan was crying quietly. Mom, we never meant... Susan, intentions don't matter. Actions matter. And your actions told me that you saw me as someone whose only value was in what I could do for you. That's not true, Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Mark, when was the last time you asked me about my quilting? Susan, when did you last invite me to do something with you that wasn't related to childcare? Kyle, when did you last call me just to see how I was doing? None of them could answer. Linda, I continued, you've lived in my house for 8 months. In that time, you've criticized my cooking, complained about my housekeeping, and suggested I wasn't mentally competent to make my own decisions. Why exactly should I continue to support someone who treats me with such disrespect? Linda's face was red with shame. I don't know. I do. It's because I allowed it. I enabled all of you to treat me poorly, because I was so desperate to feel needed that I accepted being used instead of being loved. I closed my laptop and looked at each of them. So here's what's going to happen. You have 60 days to decide if you want to rent this house at fair market value or find somewhere else to live. If you choose to stay, we'll have a formal lease agreement with rules about respect, responsibilities, and boundaries. And if we can't afford it, Kyle asked quietly. Then you'll need to figure out your own living situation just like every other adult in the world. Mom, Susan said through her tears, I understand why you're angry, but please don't punish Jamie for our mistakes. He didn't do anything wrong. I'm not punishing Jamie. He's welcome to visit me anytime. And if he wants to help with the business, he's got a job waiting for him. But Susan, you need to understand that being Jamie's mother is your responsibility, not mine. I know that. I've been so overwhelmed since the divorce. And I've been helping you manage that overwhelming feeling for months. But instead of getting stronger, you've gotten more dependent. That's not healthy for either of us. Mark finally found his voice. What about family loyalty? What about sticking together? Mark, loyalty is a two-way street. You can't expect loyalty from someone you don't respect. I do respect you. No, you don't. You respect what I can do for you. You've never shown any interest in who I am as a person. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You want to talk about fair. Fair would have been acknowledging my birthday. Fair would have been asking about my interests occasionally. Fair would have been treating me like a person instead of like a combination maid, bank, and babysitter. The room was silent except for Susan's quiet crying. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said, my voice softer now. I'm doing this because I love you too much to keep enabling you to be less than you're capable of being. What do you mean? Kyle asked. I mean that by solving all your problems for you, I've prevented you from learning to solve them yourselves. Mark, you're 38 years old, and you've never had to manage a household budget because I've always bailed you out. Susan, you're 35, and you've never had to figure out single parenting because I've been your backup plan. Kyle, you're 28, and you've never had to face real consequences for your financial irresponsibility. I looked at each of them. You're all capable of so much more than you've shown, but as long as I'm here cleaning up your messes, you'll never have to grow up. So you're abandoning us, Linda said bitterly. No, Linda. I'm giving you the chance to become the adults you should have been all along. Jamie appeared in the kitchen doorway. Grammy? Can I say something? Of course, sweetheart. He looked around the table at all the adults. I think Grammy's right. I think you all treat her like she's just here to help you. And that's not fair. She's really smart and talented, and she deserves to have her own life. Jamie, Susan started. No, Mom. I'm tired of everyone acting like Grammy's job is to take care of everyone else. She takes care of herself just fine, and she's really good at business, and she should get to do what makes her happy. I reached over and squeezed Jamie's hand. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you really going to live above the cafe? He asked. I am, and you're welcome to visit any time. In fact, I'm hoping you'll help me with some of the classes. Really? That would be awesome. I looked back at the adults. This is your choice. You can learn to see me as a person deserving of respect, or you can find other people to use. But either way, I'm done being taken for granted. Mark looked defeated. Mom, I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, Mark, but you are going to have to earn my respect back. All of you are. How do we do that? Susan asked. By treating me like someone whose life matters. By taking responsibility for your own problems. By showing interest in who I am instead of just what I can do for you. I stood up and gathered my papers. You have 60 days to decide what you want your relationships with me to look like. Choose wisely. As I walked toward the stairs, I heard Jamie say, I think Grammy's being really brave. For the first time in months, I agreed with that assessment. The morning I moved into my apartment above the cafe was the morning I finally felt like myself, again. Dorothy and I had spent the previous week arranging our living spaces and putting the finishing touches on the business below. "Evelyn, come look at this," Dorothy called from the cafe area. I walked downstairs to find her standing behind the counter, grinning like a child on Christmas morning. The space was transformed, warm lighting, exposed brick walls, comfortable seating areas, and our craft supplies beautifully displayed. "It's perfect," I breathed. "Look at the quilting corner." She led me to the area near the big windows where I'd set up my teaching space. Natural light streamed across the cutting tables, and my sample quilts hung on the walls like gallery pieces. "Mrs. Henson stopped by earlier," Dorothy said. "She brought you a card." I opened the envelope to find a simple card with a handwritten note. "Evelyn, I've watched you bloom these past few months. Your courage has inspired me to take up painting again. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to follow your dreams." "She signed up for pottery classes too," Dorothy added. Our first official day of business was scheduled for the following Monday, but we'd already booked 17 students for various classes and had advance orders for 6 custom quilts. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Grammy, can I come over after school? I want to see your apartment." I texted back, "Of course. The door's always open for you." An hour later, Jamie arrived with his backpack and a huge smile. "This place is incredible." I gave him the full tour. The bright apartment upstairs with its small but efficient kitchen. The cozy living room with windows overlooking Main Street and the tiny bedroom that felt like a sanctuary. "It's like a real artist's loft," Jamie said admiringly. "That's because I'm a real artist," I replied, and saying it out loud felt revolutionary. "How does it feel, living on your own again?" "It feels like freedom, Jamie. Like I can breathe properly for the first time in years." We went downstairs to the cafe, where Dorothy was arranging pottery pieces on display shelves. "Jamie," she said warmly. "Perfect timing. Want to help us with the final setup?" For the next 2 hours, the 3 of us worked together, organizing supplies, testing equipment, and making the space feel welcoming. Jamie proved to have a good eye for arrangement and asked thoughtful questions about the business. "Grammy, how many people do you expect for the grand opening?" "We've invited about 50 people from the community, plus our online customers who live locally. We're hoping for a good turnout." "What about family? Are Uncle Mark and Mom coming?" I paused in arranging fabric samples. "I invited them. Whether they come is up to them." The truth was, I hadn't heard much from my family since our confrontation 2 weeks ago. Mark had called once to ask about lease terms. Susan had sent a brief text asking if I was okay. And Kyle had been conspicuously silent. Linda hadn't reached out at all. "I think they're embarrassed," Jamie said perceptively. "Probably." "Are you still mad at them?" I thought about that. "I'm not mad anymore, Jamie. I'm just different. I'm not willing to go back to the way things were." "Good. You're happier now." That evening, as I sat in my new living room with a cup of tea and a book, I reflected on Jamie's observation. I was happier. For the first time in years, I was living for myself instead of simply existing to serve others. My phone rang. It was Susan. "Hi, Mom. How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. The apartment is perfect for me." "That's good. I'm glad." There was a pause. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we treated you. And you were right about all of it. I've been so focused on my own problems that I never stopped to think about yours. I appreciate you saying that, Susan. I want to do better. I want to have a real relationship with you, not just whatever we had before. What does that look like to you? I don't know exactly. Maybe we could have lunch sometime. Just the two of us. And you could tell me about your quilting, and I could actually listen instead of waiting for my turn to talk about my problems. I'd like that. Really? Really. Susan, I've never stopped loving you. I just needed you to see me. I see you now, Mom, and I'm so sorry it took me this long. After we hung up, I felt a cautious optimism about my relationship with Susan. Real change was possible, but it would take time and effort from both of us. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was arranging flowers in the cafe when I looked up to see Mark standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Hi, Mom. Is it okay if I come in?" "Of course." He walked around the space slowly, taking in the details. "This is really something. You and Dorothy did all this?" "We had help with the major construction. But yes, we designed and arranged everything ourselves. It's beautiful. Professional. Thank you." Mark stopped in front of the display of my quilts. "I never really looked at your work before. Not really." "I know. This one must have taken months." He was studying a king-size quilt with an intricate Celtic knot pattern. 3 months. It's sold already. Going to a collector in Virginia. "How much?" "If you don't mind me asking." $2,200. Mark's eyes widened. $2,200 for one quilt? It's not just a quilt, Mark. It's art. It's craftsmanship. It's something that will last for generations. He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "Mom, I came to apologize. Really apologize, not just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal." "I'm listening." "I've spent my whole adult life treating you like you existed to solve my problems. I never asked what you wanted, what made you happy, what your dreams were. I just assumed you didn't have any beyond taking care of us." "Why did you assume that?" "Because it was easier than seeing you as a whole person, with your own needs. If you were just Mom, the person who fixed things, then I didn't have to feel guilty about using you." His honesty surprised me. That's very self-aware, Mark. "I've had a lot of time to think these past 2 weeks. Linda and I have been looking at apartments, trying to figure out how to afford rent, and it's been humbling. Good. Humbling builds character." He smiled ruefully. "You sound like Dad." "Your father was a wise man. He also knew how to take care of himself and others without expecting someone else to manage his life. I want to learn how to do that, and I want to learn how to have a relationship with you based on respect, not just need. What would that look like?" "I don't know yet. Maybe I could come by sometime and you could teach me about quilting. Not because I need something from you, but because I want to understand what you love about it." "I'd like that, Mark. And maybe I could help out here sometimes with the business stuff. I know I've made a lot of mistakes with money, but I do understand business basics." "Are you offering to work for me?" "If you'll have me. Part-time, whatever you can afford to pay. I need to start somewhere, and I'd rather start by trying to contribute to something you've built than just taking from you." I looked at my oldest son, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been waiting to see for years. I saw a man who was ready to grow up. We'll try it. Part-time, minimum. Wage, and you'll have to earn your way up. That's fair. And Mark, this isn't charity. If you don't do good work, you'll be fired, son or not. I understand. Then welcome to Second Chapter Cafe and Studio. As Mark left, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope for a real relationship with my oldest child. That afternoon, Dorothy and I hosted our first official quilting class. 8 women from the community came to learn basic techniques, and the energy in the room was electric. These women weren't just learning to sew. They were connecting, creating, sharing stories. This is what I always imagined, I told Dorothy during a break. What? A place where women could create beautiful things and feel valued for their creativity. You've done it, Evelyn. You've created exactly what you dreamed of. As I watched my students working on their first projects, chatting and laughing together, I realized Dorothy was right. I had done it. I'd taken my dreams and made them real. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The Grands, opening of Second Chapter. Cafe and Studio fell on a perfect October morning, exactly 1 month after my forgotten birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was my real birthday, the day I finally started living the life I'd always wanted. Dorothy and I had been preparing for weeks, but when the first customers started arriving at 8 a.m., my heart still raced with nervous excitement. Deep breaths, Dorothy whispered as we watched people stream through the door. We've got this. Mrs. Henson was our first customer, ordering a lavender latte and signing up for both pottery and quilting classes. Evelyn, I'm so proud of you, she said, squeezing my hand. This place is going to be the heart of the community. By noon, we'd served 43 customers, sold 6 quilts, booked 12 new students, and received 3 custom orders. The cafe was buzzing with conversation, laughter, and the satisfying sounds of people creating beautiful things. I was arranging a display of hand-thrown pottery when I looked up to see familiar faces in the doorway. Susan entered first, looking nervous but determined. Behind her came Jamie, then Mark, and finally, to my surprise, Linda and Kyle, my family, all of them. Here. Grammy! Jamie ran over and hugged me tightly. This place is amazing. It's so busy. Thank you, sweetheart. I'm glad you're here. Susan approached more cautiously. Mom, this is incredible. I can't believe you did all this. Dorothy and I did it together. It's beautiful. Really beautiful. Mark was staring around the space with obvious amazement. Mom, there are people everywhere. Is it always this busy? It's our first day, so this is special. But we've had steady customers all week during our soft opening. Linda hung back, looking uncomfortable. Finally, she approached. Evelyn, I owe you an apology. A real one. Go ahead. I was wrong about everything. About your abilities, about your dreams, about who you are as a person. I let my own frustrations and insecurities turn me into someone cruel, and I took it out on you when you were the one person who never deserved it. I studied her face, looking for sincerity. What changed your mind? Living without your support for the past month. Trying to manage a household, a budget, and a relationship when I'd never had to do any of it on my own. I realized how much you were carrying, and how little credit we gave you for it. Kyle stepped forward then, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by something I'd rarely seen from him. Genuine remorse. Mom, I need to say something too. I've been a terrible son. I took money from you, lived in your house, ate your food, and never once asked what you needed or wanted. I just assumed you'd always be there to catch me when I fell. And now? Now I'm trying to learn how to catch myself. I got a job at the hardware store. Nothing fancy, but it's steady. And I'm living in a studio apartment that I pay for, myself. He paused. I want to earn the right to be in your life again. I looked at my youngest son, seeing maturity in his eyes that had been absent for years. That means a lot to me, Kyle. The cafe continued to bustle around us as my family stood in an awkward circle, years of dysfunction finally being addressed in the middle of my greatest triumph. There's something else, Mark said quietly. We wanted to give you this. Susan pulled out a wrapped package and handed it to me with trembling hands. I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautifully framed photo of the family from years ago, but it had been altered. Where the original showed all of us together, someone had carefully edited it to put me at the center, surrounded by everyone else. Jamie's idea, Susan said softly. He said you were always the center of our family, but we never showed it. My throat tightened with emotion. This is beautiful. There's something on the back, Jamie said excitedly. I turned the frame over to find an inscription in multiple handwritings. To Mom, Grammy, the heart of our family, the foundation of our strength, and the inspiration for our growth. We're sorry it took us so long to see what was always there. Happy birthday, 63 years late, but with all our love. Below that were individual messages from each family member. Mark, thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Linda, you taught me what real strength looks like. I hope I can learn to be half as gracious as you. Susan, you are my hero and my role model. I want to be the kind of mother to Jamie that you were to all of us. Kyle, you never stopped believing I could be better. Now I'm finally ready to prove you right. Jamie, Grammy, you're the strongest person I know. Thank you for showing me that dreams don't have expiration dates. I had to sit down. Dorothy, who had been watching from behind the counter, came over with a box of tissues. Well, she said with a knowing smile, I think this calls for a celebration coffee on the house. As my family settled around one of the large tables, I watched them interact differently than they had in years. Mark and Linda weren't dominating the conversation. Susan wasn't apologizing for taking up space. Kyle wasn't looking for an excuse to leave. And Jamie, sweet Jamie, was beaming with pride as he showed his relatives around Grammy's Empire, as he'd started calling it. Mom, Susan said during a quiet moment, I signed up for your business management class. You did? I want to learn. I want to understand what you've built here. And maybe I want to build something of my own too. What kind of something? I've been thinking about going back to school. Maybe getting my teaching certificate. I always loved working with kids, but I never thought I was smart enough. Susan, you've always been brilliant. You just never had the confidence to show it. I'm learning that confidence comes from doing things that scare you, she said, glancing around the cafe. You've taught me that. As the afternoon wore on, customers continued to flow in and out. Several people approached me to compliment the space and ask about classes. One woman wanted to commission a wedding quilt. Another asked if I could teach her daughter to sew. But the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Henson stopped by our table. Evelyn, I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I wanted to tell your family something. Of course. She looked at Mark, Linda, Susan, and Kyle in turn. Your mother has been the talk of the town for weeks, not just because of this beautiful business, but because of the way she's conducted herself through all of this change. She's shown grace, dignity, and strength that has inspired half the women in this community." "We know," Jamie said proudly. "She's amazing. She is. But what I want you to know is that she never once spoke poorly of any of you during this transition. Not once. Even when people asked questions or made assumptions, she always said that family is complicated and that she loved you all. My family looked stunned. She protected your privacy and your dignity even when—" Mrs. Henson paused delicately. "Even when others might not have done the same." After Mrs. Henson left, the table was quiet for a long moment. "Mom," Mark said finally, "I don't know how to thank you for that." "You don't need to thank me for loving you, Mark. Even when I was angry, even when I felt unappreciated, I never stopped loving any of you. We don't deserve that kind of loyalty," Linda said quietly. "Maybe not. But that's what family means to me. It means loving people even when they can't see their own worth." Kyle wiped his eyes. "How do we make this right? How do we become the family you deserve?" "You start by being honest with yourselves and each other. You continue by taking responsibility for your own lives. And you prove it by treating each other with the same respect you'd want from strangers." "It sounds simple when you say it like that," Susan said. "Simple doesn't mean easy. It takes practice, patience, and a lot of forgiveness, of others and of yourselves." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the cafe windows, my family prepared to leave. But the dynamic had shifted completely from when they'd arrived. Mark approached me privately. "Mom, about that part-time job offer. I want to earn it. What do I need to do?" "Show up tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring a notebook and a willingness to learn. We'll start with inventory management and customer service basics. And if I mess up, then you'll learn from it and do better the next time. That's how growth works." Linda came next. "Evelyn, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you be willing to teach me to quilt? I'd pay for lessons, of course." "I'd be honored to teach you, Linda, but not because you're paying me, because I think you might find something you've been looking for in the process." Susan's goodbye was the longest. "Mom, I want you to know that watching you these past months has changed how I see myself. I spent so long thinking I wasn't capable of independence. But seeing you build all this, it makes me believe I can build something too." "You can, sweetheart. And I'll be here to support you. Not to do it for you, but to cheer you on." Kyle's goodbye was simpler, but no less meaningful. "I love you, Mom. And I'm going to spend every day proving that I'm worthy of being your son." Jamie was the last to leave. "Grammy, thank you for letting me be part of this. For letting me help. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did, Jamie. For believing in me before I remembered how to believe in myself. Are you happy now? Really happy?" I looked around the cafe, at the evidence of dreams made real, at the customers still, lingering over coffee and conversation, at Dorothy cleaning up behind the counter with a satisfied smile. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm really happy." After everyone left, Dorothy and I sat in the quiet cafe, counting the day's receipts and reflecting on what had transpired. "Well," Dorothy said, "that was quite a family reunion." "It was. How do you feel about it all?" I thought for a moment. Hopeful. For the first time in years, I feel hopeful about my relationships with them. They seemed genuinely changed. Change is a process, not an event, but today felt like a real beginning. And if they slip back into old patterns, then I'll handle it the same way I handled it this time, with boundaries, consequences, and love, but not at the expense of my own dignity. Dorothy nodded approvingly. You've come a long way from the woman who was afraid to ask for help with a business plan. I've learned that I was never the problem. I was just surrounded by people who needed me to be small so they could feel big. And now? Now I know that I can be exactly as big as my dreams demand, and anyone who can't handle that isn't my problem anymore. As we locked up the cafe that night, I felt a deep sense of completion. Not because the story was over, but because the next chapter could finally begin. The woman who had sat at a kitchen table on her forgotten birthday, invisible and unappreciated, was gone. In her place stood someone I was proud to be. Evelyn Carter, business owner, artist, grandmother, and, for the first time in decades, a woman living life on her own terms. The sign outside read, "Second Chapter Cafe and Studio." But for me, it represented so much more than a business. It was proof that it's never too late to write a new story for your life. It was evidence that dignity, once reclaimed, becomes unshakable. And it was a daily reminder that the most powerful transformations begin not with grand gestures, but with the quiet decision to finally value yourself as much as you value others. My second chapter had begun, and it was everything I dreamed it could be.